I hate this house. I say to myself, walking in the front door. Today is Friday, we got out of school today, finally, for spring break. They say your home is your peace after school, or vice versa. I hate both places equally. This house is way too big. I don't mean to brag about my parents' riches, but I'm an only child. For some reason they bought a house with 3 baths and 5 bedrooms. They say the extra space is for guests. My parents have only had friends over once, for a party that was 9 years ago. Of course they never let me attend said parties, so when they had them I'd stay at my aunt's an hour away. I made my way into the kitchen, and grabbed my usual snacks, a mini bag of Doritos, a water bottle, and a couple of fruit roll-ups. I zoned out badly, to the point where I was dancing and humming quite loudly. I do this quite often, dissociate. My parents get really concerned with it. I start walking back and forth while talking to myself. The disturbing thoughts that I have are what concern me the most. They're always murderous and violent. My dance was interrupted by the sound of laughter. My dad was watching me, giggling the entire time. Continue what you were doing, it was cute. My dad says, walking over to me. He grabs some of my Doritos and begins to munch on them. You know, you should really stop eating these, they're horrible for you. You're eating them, besides, I have a fast immune system. Also I got 4 years to fix my diet, so I'm going to enjoy all the junk food I can. I say, rolling my eyes and eating a chip. My dad kisses me on the forehead and says, "Yeah, I gotta break you out of that habit fast." People who say that, usually don't end up doing what they say they're going to do. Next thing you know you're gonna be 34 with a gut and insecure, and worst of all you're gonna have an unending craving. When you get to that age you wanna be looking like Papa, fit and lean. He says, flexing his triceps, then giggling. I laugh at the sight of how stupid he looks, then give him a fist bump. Even though he makes me mad, I still love him. He's not like other dads, he's pretty weird, doesn't force me to do things other fathers would. He knows I'm a strange teenage boy, who isn't into sports or anything of the sorts, and he respects that. I watch him as he stands there on his phone, and notice he's in formal attire. "Why do you have a suit on?" I ask. He looks up at me, then down at his suit as if he forgot he even had it on. "Oh, you know, every 3 years the group throws a party," he says. "Oh, I forgot, but isn't it usually at like 10? It's only 4 o'clock. Why did you get dressed so early?" I question. "Usually because I forget about it, so I got dressed early, don't question it," he says, flipping his hands. I reply as simple, "Okay," and walked off with my snacks. Finally, I reached my bedroom, and flopped down on my bed. I take in the comfort, before taking off my shoes and snuggling up. My room was a decent size for how big this house was. I always think it should be a little bigger than it is, but I know if it was ever bigger I'd just complain. I had my own bathroom, thank God, and a total of 2 windows, both with black-out curtains. I absolutely hated sunlight. I always kept my red lights a red hue, and across from my bed was my PC. I don't really have much decor, but I do have a bunch of random shit lying around. I lay in my bed scrolling through TikTok, fighting the urge to fall asleep. After 2 minutes of drifting I finally fell asleep. I'm awoken by the sound of knocking on my door. I look over to my alarm clock that reads 9:34 p.m. Damn, I was asleep all day. I thought to myself. "Come in." I shout, propping myself up out of bed. My mom and dad walk in, both dressed in formal attire. My mom is wearing a shiny red dress that I really can't describe other than it's shiny and red. And my dad is wearing a different suit than before, this time it's red instead of black. "Why'd you change your suit?" I ask. My dad looks down and smooths his blazer out. "I forgot the colors were red. Even though they're always red," he says, looking down at the floor disappointed in himself. My mom pats his shoulder and says, We're about to head off. My mom says, coming to sit on my bed followed by my dad. This confused me, they looked quite worried. What's wrong? I asked, twisting my face confused as ever. My mom grabs my hand and says, "Do you have something to tell us?" "What?" I question. I just woke up, and honestly didn't know what was going on. You were posted on your school's Facebook. You won an ELA award. My mom shouts. Oh, I forgot, it's over there on my desk. I say, rubbing my eyes and pointing at the trophy. Look, these things may not be important to you, but they are very important to us. My mom says my dad agrees with her. Okay, I'll make sure to tell you next time, I say smiling. I hated being posted on our school Facebook. The only part one like about winning those awards is when my parents praise me. They each give me a kiss, and begin walking towards the door. Okay, we're finna head out, my dad says closing the door. My mom opens it back up and reminds me of the usual when they go out. Oh, and I left dinner on the stove. When you're done with it, put leftovers in the fridge. Also, you're old enough to know this, but if someone knocks on that door, do not answer it. She says, then blowing me a kiss. I hear the front door close and immediately hop out of bed. I boot up my PC before going downstairs to get some dinner. It was 11:35 p.m. I have been playing the game for at least 2 hours now. I don't know what time my parents are supposed to come back tonight. If my memory serves me right, they usually come back between 12 to 3. Whatever. I think to myself, they'll be back when they get back. I try to put my headphones back on when I hear a firm bang, bang, bang. Coming from downstairs, the sound was so ear-splitting it made me jump out of my seat. I raced downstairs to see what was making all that noise. Someone was knocking on the front door. I stopped in the middle of the stairs, and just stared at the door. The knocks become more urgent with every second. That can't be my mom or dad. They have a key to get in, and would call me to unlock the door if they forgot them. I pull out my phone, started looking through my contact to call them when I hear woman start shouting. Help. Please help me. I hesitate for a second. This could be a trap for a robbery or something. I say to myself, please let me in. The woman shouts again. I let my judgment get the better of me and go to the door. Luckily we have another door that separates the front door, so if I suspect anything I can just close the door immediately. I open the door and the woman looks a mess. Her hair was all over the place, and she had blood all over herself. She begins tugging on the lock screen. Please. Please let me in, she says, sobbing at this point. I open the lock screen and she pushes me out of the way and quickly closes the door and locks it. I get back up to my feet and ask her, "Are you okay? What happened?" She gets startled, quickly turns to look at me. Before walking towards the kitchen, leaving bloody footprints behind her. As she walked by me, it smelled like she drowned herself in a perfume. I don't know what the smell was, but it smells wonderful. This is when I realized she was barefoot. Look, I'm willing to help you, but you have to tell me what's going on, or I'm going to call the police. I say, keeping my distance from her. The thought of the police seemed to scare her. She jumped at me and pleaded with me. Please don't call the police, please, she said, grabbing at me, leaving my clothes red. Okay, calm down. Where did all this blood come from? I say, trying to stay calm. Surprising, the sight of blood did not freak me out the most. It was the fact I let a complete stranger in my house and I'm completely oblivious to what's going on. It's not my blood, she says. It's not your blood, Doc. I shout, raising my eyebrow and backing up. Well, it is my blood, but others are mixed in, she says, wiping her face. This worried me badly. Again, I wasn't moved by the blood, strangely, but more so that I do not know what is going on, so I ask her, I'm going to ask you one more time what is going on. If you do not tell me, I'm gonna have to force you out of my house. She responds, looking down at the floor. Okay, but can I clean myself off first? I walked up to the sink, let the faucet run out some warm water. Luckily, we had a room next to the kitchen with towels and other clothes for guests, so I can get her some nice clean clothes while keeping an eye on her. After she gets dressed, I pour her a glass of water. By this time, it's 12:45 and my parents still aren't home. She sits down at the breakfast nook in a stand across from her, staring at the features. Her skin is fair. She has pretty brown hair that complement her brown eyes. She had a couple of freckles stretched out across her face, but what stuck out the most was the symbol tattooed on her shoulder. What's that? I ask, pointing at the symbol. She looks over at it and covers it, quickly growing back into discomfort. Oh yeah, that reminds me, you're probably so confused, she speaks up, sipping on the water. Yeah, I am, and I'd appreciate it if you'd speed up the process of informing me. I say, getting impatient. Sorry, she says, taking a pause and sipping on her water again while settling in her seat. I start tapping my fingers, growing more agitated. Alright, I'm gonna call the cops. I say, get the phone out of my pocket. And oh please, she says, jumping out of her seat. I'm going to tell you, okay, she says, calming down and sitting back down. I place my phone on the counter in front of her. Okay, go on. I say.
About 3 years ago, I lost my job and my house. Since I didn't have proof of any address, it was difficult for me to find another job. I was out on my knees, accepting any handout that someone gave me, until one day a person came up to me. He had pitch black hair that was slicked back, a nice tailored suit on, and the darkest black eyes ever. He offered me a sum of money that I couldn't refuse. He told me he would help me get back on my feet and that he had a job for me. He took me to this place and told me about this cult.
I was baffled. She looks up at me while rimming the clear glass.
Cult. I was baffled. She looks up at me while rimming the clear glass. Yes. A cult. He told me all about this cult. They were a group of devil worshippers who gathered together every few years to please an ancient demon. 16 years ago, they accidentally summoned a demon and barely made it out with their lives. The demon promised to spare them if they bred him a child that he could use to walk Earth. Even after I was told this mess, I wasn't in a position where I could refuse the money they were offering. I accepted the invitation and they gave me this branding. She pointed to the symbol, which was a circle with a star inside it. I noticed quickly that this tattoo was not the same as everyone else's. There were 5 other new recruits that had different tattoos that matched, but I was the only new recruit with a different one. That's probably why they let me get away. They told us they'd text us the next time we'd meet up. I got a text last week telling us we will meet up tonight. Like I said, they'd meet up a few years later to please the demon in other ways. I thought they'd just have an orgy or something. It was something a lot more sinister. They tied up me and the other 5. One by one, they subjected them to various torture methods that would eventually kill them. I would watch as they stretch a man out by his limbs. His screams of pain were so agonizing I couldn't listen to it anymore, and I broke free and jumped out a window and ran for my life, and then I ended up here.
I stood there dumbfounded, and the only thing I could mutter out of my mouth was, wow. I placed my hands on my head and started panicking. If these people are out looking for this girl, they wouldn't just let her off like this. I can't afford to lose my life today. I walked around the counter and grabbed her by the shoulders and looked her in the eyes. We need to call the police. They could be out looking for you, and I don't want to stir up any more trouble. I said to her, her eyes widened at the word police. No, you can't go to get it. The police were in on it as well. Don't you think I would have called the police by now? She says, pushing my hands on her shoulder. She's right, she would have been called the police. Well, what are we going to do, because you can't stay here? My parents are going to be home any minute. Dashed and cut off by the sound of a ding coming from my phone on the counter. The screams while pointing to my box screen that displayed a picture of me and my parents. Those are my parents, what are you talking about? The girl backs up and throws my phone at me. I catch it then slowly approach her. Back away from me, you were scheming with those devils, she shouts, grabbing a knife and pointing it at me. I back up and quickly run behind the counter. I don't know what you're talking about, but I know I'm gonna call the police on your crazy ass, Doc. I shouted back at her and I opened up my phone to reveal a text from my dad. Dad, we're on our way home, something went wrong at the party and we've got news that a mentally disturbed woman is going door to door threatening people. If you hear someone knocking, don't open the door. I look up at the woman and she shouts at me. That man is the man who recruited me. He and his wife were at the meeting, she yells, slinging the knife around. Lady, I don't know what the hell you got going on, but you need to get out of my house. I screamed back at her. I began picking up things and throwing them. Gladly. She yells before she turns around, running for the front door. As she's reaching for the door, I notice outside shining lights are piercing through the blinds. I look outside and notice about a dozen cars parked in the driveway. I look over at the girl and as she reaches to open the door it busts wide open, knocking her to the ground. She's still conscious, but the force of the door rendered her crippled for what I assume at least a minute. My dad walks in, looks down at the woman with a blank face and over at me before calling out. Yeah, she's in here, Doc. He yells out, opening the door a little more wide, and in comes my mom. She runs over to me and gives me a tight hug before asking, did that thing do anything to you? No, she didn't. She was just rambling about how you're in a cult and you tried to kill her. I say, giggling a little relieved to finally see my parents. My mom doesn't seem to be amused. She grabs my hands and looks me in the eyes. You're growing up, eventually you'd have to find out the truth. Telling you wasn't the hard part, it was figuring out how to bring it out of you. I know when you see this you wouldn't want to retaliate, that it would feel like second nature, but it's finally time. I looked at her confused before looking over to find several people dressed in red walking into the room. They were taking the girl and tying her up in the living room. My mom puts her arm around me and guides me there as well. They had propped the woman into a chair. By now she was conscious. Her mouth is covered with tape containing her screams and shouts. By now all the people in red were surrounding her. They make a path for me as my mom walks me to the middle. I meet my dad there and he takes out a knife with a star carved in it and cuts the girl's arm. She winces in pain and begins thrashing around. What's crazy is my mom was right, this wasn't fazing me. It's like the smell from earlier was here, but a lot stronger. The blood became addicting. I was mesmerized by the sight of it. My dad puts his hands on my back and gives me the knife. I think you know what to do, Mama. I grab the knife and walk slowly toward the girl. By now she's looking at me. I reach for the tape that covered her mouth and strip it off. Please. You helped me. I know you wouldn't do this. Don't listen to them, don't let them turn you into a murderer. She shouts. I put my hand on her head and caresses it before taking the knife and putting it to her throat. And oh, please somebody help me, help, she takes her final words as I sliced her throat open. Blood spilling out everywhere. I took a look at her and then to the knife. It was as if something was speaking to me. Like I had finally reached climax, I brought the knife to my mouth before tasting the blood. It was so, savoring it fulfilled a hunger in me that I didn't even know was present. I catch a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the knife, my eyes shifting from pitch black not a crimson red. My irises resembled that of a snake. It felt so glorious that I couldn't help but smile before grabbing the now dead girl and drinking every last drop of blood that exited from her body.